I am not a believer in the supernatural, nor the divine, though I tried some magic ritual revolving around a magic pill with my sister when she was dealing with her leukemia. Ironically, after that, she started getting better. Anyway, I don't believe there is anything beyond this existence. Once you die, that's it. No more chances, no eternal suffering or endless bliss until the end of time. Once the figurative game over tagline floats before your eyes, you're out of the game for good. I've known this much throughout my entire life. I've also been dead, well, brain dead for 2 minutes. I've nearly drowned during a trip into the ocean. Now, I experienced a near-death experience as a result of my anorexic brain injury. I suppose they can feel a kind of different when you know they are just in your head. My NDE wasn't exactly pleasant, and it's not like I've been an overly pessimistic person or anything. I don't really know why I saw those things. I don't come from a hell-fearing religious family. The whole concept of a fiery domain filled to the brim with fire and suffering wasn't really occupying space in my mind. That wasn't even what I saw when I was oxygen deprived. Anyway, I have to admit that I've changed my outlook on life, kind of obvious after almost dying, and on myself as a person, or rather on the human experience. It all started with me falling out of the cruise ship and smacking my head on my way into the water. Once I fell into the ocean, I felt everything turning and twisting in unnatural angles around me. I was completely disorientated, robbed of my ability to navigate my body around and swim. My vision was blurry at best at the moment, and my insides were turning. The last thing I remember before being completely submerged is the screams of people coming from above and a wave making its way towards me. Next thing I know, I'm weightless and sinking. I am pretty sure my eyes were closed because I couldn't really see anything. I was feeling increasingly lightheaded, but I guess being concussed annulled my survival instincts. I was just letting myself sink like a rock. I was eerily calm at that moment. I think I knew I was done for, but I didn't resist the notion. Excuse my lack of memory on the matter, brain damage tends to do this. Everything was quiet and dark, pleasantly so. For the longest moments, it's like a part of me was still trying to stay afloat, mentally that is, but the rest of me was gone, and that's probably why my perceived passage of time slowed down so much. As I was sinking towards the ocean floor, I slowly began to sense a warm feeling emanating from beneath me. It felt weird but somewhat welcoming. I attempted to open my eyes, but couldn't. I knew I should have been worried, but I wasn't. The calmness persisted, and with it came a bright reddish light from below. The next thing I know, the light is above me, and the back of my head started throbbing something awful, as if someone was trying to pull out my skull through the pores of my scalp. It became so bad, I thought I was going to hurl the contents of my guts and swallow in little amounts of water. My eyes shot open, and much to my surprise, or lack thereof actually, I was in a different place. I wasn't underwater anymore. That much I knew. Other than that, I had zero ideas as to where I've been. I was floating upside down above some sort of wavy, sickly green surface riddled with trees that looked like they were made up of hollowed out bones. There were no leaves to speak of, though after a few moments I began to notice something on these trees. There were naked corpses attached to their branches, all of them twitching and twisting as they swayed in the wind. The sky above me had a disgusting reddish-orange tint to it, and everything seemed kind of still and lifeless. That includes me. I didn't really feel anything, even though deep inside I know I should have felt something. I was just kind of floating there, not resisting the almighty current of the river of destiny. Everything was dead silent, at the beginning at least. After a while, I've seen something fly by me. Something ugly and unnatural. A beast that had the appearance of a mutated gigantic bat with no hair and a face disturbingly similar to that of a human's. It let out an ear-piercing shriek and descended onto one of the bony trees and began eating away at one of the corpses. It quickly turned out of that it wasn't a corpse but rather lively human or humanoid thing. I probably won't ever forget its screams as the beast tore through its body. The screams filled my ears, and soon enough it became clear that this occurrence was pretty common in that place. I was just oblivious to it up to that point. The screaming would only get worse from there on. I wasn't really bothered by it. However, somehow, I mentioned the experience made me change my outlook on things. That's one of those things that still bothers me to this day. How could I just observe while people, sentient beings, are being torn to shreds and I feel nothing? I was just floating there, seemingly aimlessly. I don't remember all the details of the ordeal, but at some point I was floating above a field that looked like it was taken straight out of a corrupted negative photograph. The grass was black, the rocks neon green, and there were guts and other animal parts strewn about all over the field. In the center of it all was another human, once more naked, and it was surrounded by a pack of other humans. These were somewhat oddly shaped. Their heads elongated like a muzzle, and their joints were located in odd places. They all stood on four and were erect. What came after they had pounced on the poor thing was something I'd rather not go in detail into. He was violated, and his insides were probably rearranged is all I'm willing to mention. Again, I was just floating there, watching that whole horror show going on, but I wasn't affected at all by what was going on in front of my eyes. I still remember what it looked like, and now every time the scenery pops up from the depths of my mind, I feel reviled and miserable. Then nothing. I felt nothing at all. I was just watching as an atrocity was taking place, and it went on for a while until the ground shook underneath what I can only describe as Cyclops covered in a litany of cancer tumors. The beasts tried to scatter upon the arrival of the giant, but it was too quick for them. It grabbed the whole orgy of humanoid mass and smashed it into a pile of blood and black mass in the palm of its hands, and then stuffed the gooey remains into its mouth, producing disgusting crunching and gulping sounds as it chewed. Screams and cries of agony filled my ears from all over as I kept on floating through that morbid domain. There were a few other horrible things I've seen as I was floating in that space that I sort of vaguely remember. The most profound one was the appearance of a few shadowy things emerging from the ground, producing some corrosive substance from their bodies and latching themselves onto one of the bigger hellspawns I've seen there. The thing wailed like a broken siren once these things came into contact with it. For the first time, I felt fear when one of those things noticed me. Actually, I should say, it looked at my direction. I saw its wide-orbed, featureless eyes and that stick-drawn mouth, and my heart sank. I felt a chill course through my body, and I felt myself getting stiff. The thing turned back to its prey, but the sensation wouldn't let up, especially since I was nearing the end of my journey. When that happened and I saw what awaited me at its end, my heartache was getting worse with each passing moment. I remember seeing this massive shadow devouring the horizon, and something massive was casting it. I only caught a glimpse of the thing because I was floating with my feet towards the gargantuan shadow. It was cast by a sort of skeletal centipede, the end of which I couldn't see. the front of which consisted of a massive body reminiscent of a rib cage with a fleshy mass that has many arm-like appendages with tube-shaped extremities that extend to no end. One of those tube-like things was connected to the back of my head. I've only seen that because the tube connected to my head flopped suddenly in front of my face. The realization worsened my ever-increasing sense of dread. The screaming had gone quiet, replaced by the increasingly loud sound of beating war drums that came from within me. I was panicking, drowning once more, this time in fear. I couldn't do anything. I was stuck, forced to endure whatever that thing wanted to do to me. By the time pounding in my ears had turned into the symphony of machine gun fire, I've noticed the abomination had a head hanging at the bottom of the fleshy mass. It looked sunken and hollow like a dehydrated corpse would. The head seemed to grow larger and larger with each passing moment. I knew what was coming. This thing was going to swallow me. Pins and needles poked all over my body. My spine and shoulders caught on fire. The noises died down. The colors turned dull, and a rain of body parts showered my entire vicinity. Before I knew it, my vision had completely faded. I was completely fading away. I felt like I was being torn apart. It wasn't painful, rather felt like I was just losing parts of myself, getting erased out of existence. Then the pain came. I felt my legs being crushed with a sickening crack, then my lower torso. I heard myself scream. Dully, the pain felt as if I was submerged in magma. I came to my sense when something grabbed a hold of my left arm. One of those shadowy things, it held onto my arm and stared with its empty, barely distinguishable face at me, through me. I felt like everything had turned ice cold for a second, like I was thrown into cold water. I felt a painful pressure build up in my chest, and my arms felt as if it had caught fire. I remember seeing the exposed muscle tissue just below the shadow's grip. Then came one last crunch, and everything turned black again before I woke up on the cruise ship once again, surrounded by onlookers and medics. I was resuscitated, and there was some brain damage apparently. Nothing too noticeable. I guess a few memory problems and the odd nightmares or awful daydreams, but other than that, nothing out of the ordinary. That is, excluding my occasional self-loathing over the fact that I managed to be so apathetic to unimaginable horrors, or even create them in my mind, for that matter. Though, actually, I occasionally see a shadow lurking in the corner of my vision, one that looks like a humanoid-shaped flame with a face drawn on a stick figure, white orbs for eyes, and a jagged line for a mouth. It just stands there before vanishing, looking at me, or rather through me. Every time it does, I feel like my body freezes, in the literal sense, like I've been submerged into ice water. I get cold, and I can see vapors coming out of my mouth. I'm not sure if it's some sort of hallucination or something else. I mean, they've told me I'll suffer from neurodegeneration sooner or later, probably sooner. I'm not really sure, to be honest. I mean, everything looks just like before the accident. My life's gone on as usual after all the hospital visits and the treatments. Everything seems to be just fine, but sometimes it seems like... Honestly, I'm pretty sure I've already mentioned this, but the thought creeps up on me from time to time. It makes no sense whatsoever, and it's highly unlikely. What if I'm actually a little off since the accident and nobody's told me? This could be the case, though again, I don't know. Everything seems perfect, a little too perfect, I guess. What if I'm actually dead and still stuck in hell? No, that's highly unlikely. The more probable explanation is that I've left a piece of my mind, A piece of my sanity in hell. Yeah, that's more like it. I remember waking in the middle of the night because something was standing over me. I opened my eyes and couldn't quite make the shape of the thing in front of me. There was definitely something there, something large and ominous. Before I could react, I felt something flying towards me and everything faded to black. When I came to, I remember the sound of a door being unlocked, filling my ears. My head was throbbing with an awful pain and my eyes registered nothing but darkness. Then came the steps. It was the sound of heavy boots pounding on a wooden floor. I was too disoriented to question the odd circumstances all around me. I was supposed to be at home. There should have been no one who would walk around in boots. I thought I was having some kind of weird dream. My body being seemingly stuck in place reinforced that notion. The heavy steps kept getting closer and louder with each passing moment until all of the sudden a dim light filled everything all around me, further dizzying me. When my eyes finally adjusted to the influx of photons, I realized something was covering my face. Again, I didn't have any time to digest the turn of events because a deep voice shouted bombarded my ears. "What the fuck? Who the fuck are you?" The sheer aggression in the tone unnerved me, and I started considering the possibility that I was not dreaming. All sorts of morbid thoughts crossed my mind. I was starting to feel the sweat build up in the back of my neck and trace its way down my spine. The hair all over my skin stood up with fear. Once the cover was ripped from my face, my body spasms with terror. In front of me stood a middle-aged man with a scarred face. He grabbed me by the shirt and started to interrogate me. "Who the fuck are you? How did you get in here? Huh?" The way he was screaming at me made my whole body tense up to the point of my muscles started aching. That's when I noticed I was tied to a chair. I tried explaining to the man that I am mute by moving my mouth and emanating random sounds, but he didn't seem to register the point, as he just kept threatening me and even punched me in the jaw, making my eyes involuntarily well up after I heard something pop and the familiar saline taste of blood began filling my mouth. He broke my jaw. I wish I could scream. I wish I could do anything, but I wasn't that fortunate. I had lost my ability to speak after my larynx was crushed years ago. Out of spite, I spat the blood onto the man's carpet, and in retaliation, he punched me a few more times. My fear had turned into an adrenaline-fueled rage. I managed to kick at the man's leg hard enough to cause him to fall. He stumbled back up, threatening to kill as he threw another punch into my already cracked jaw, forcing my head to turn in such a way that I was facing his window. I had no idea how I ended up in this man's house either, but I couldn't really tell him this much, and he wasn't bright enough to figure out the fact that I'm just as confused and upset as he had been. I started laughing, probably as a means to deal with the god-awful pain shooting through my face. I saw someone standing in front of the house. A sense of relief came over me when I noticed the figure making their way towards the house. But when it got close enough to make its features out, my heart sunk to my heels. The middle-aged man who was holding onto my shirt must have felt really powerful at that moment, because he remarked, "Finally understand what you've gotten yourself into?" I just looked at him with a hollow stare. What I had seen outside of his house made no sense whatsoever. It was the shape of evil, an abomination, hell itself etched into a face. It was something that shouldn't exist, a monstrosity mimicking the form of a human being, mocking it. I just shook my head and began thrashing in my bounds, making primitive sounds. I was supposed to be at home. There should not have been anyone who would walk around in boots. I guess I caught the middle-aged man by surprise because he let go of me, and I think he noticed that wraith-like thing outside of his window because he tore his gaze off me and yelled out, "Hey!" He was too late, however, as something large and dark came flying in, shattering the window and sending shards of glass all over the room. The flying object flew directly into my tormentor and sent him onto the floor. I froze in time. Everything suddenly became brighter and more vivid in my eyes, but the sounds became dull and distant, drowned out by the sound of my heartbeat, which was pounding inside of my head relentlessly. The middle-aged man came to almost immediately and cursed angrily in a tongue I couldn't understand. His rage turned into sadness the moment he realized what had hit him. A black dog, I presumed his dog, with its head cleaved in half, was sent flying at him. He clutched at the corpse of the poor thing while I just sat there, attempting to not throw up at the sight of dog brains scattered all over the floor. My discomfort was so intense I could barely feel the pain in my jaw. The lights went out and my heartbeat became even more erratic. The man's rage returned and started sounding like a demon about to rampage and destroy everything in its path. I had heard him storming out of the room because I heard something being forcefully dragged open and then closed shut again, followed by the sound of the loading of a gun. The whole situation had gotten so stressful that I started feeling cramps all over my body and my face started pounding, once more forcing me to groan loudly. The man stormed out of the house, cursing as he made his way out. There was silence, eerie silence, and I swear I saw something dash in front of me in the darkness. I almost turned the chair I was tied to over. I just sat there, hoping to make it alive out of this whole mess when the lights came back on. I really wish they hadn't. I threw up all over myself. I emptied the contents of my stomach because once the lights came back on, I saw a naked woman standing at the edge of the stairs in front of me, covered in blood and clutching at her insides, cupping her internal organs in her hands. The middle-aged man came back inside, holding a gun, but stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the naked woman. She glanced at him weakly and attempted to utter something before collapsing and falling down the stairs with sickening thumping noises. The middle-aged man, blinded by rage, roared and fired a shell into the hall at the top end of the stairwell. The thundering of his firearm forced me to shut my eyes tightly. The pain in my jaw kept steadily increasing, and so I kept my eyes shut for a few moments while the middle-aged man sobbed and cried incoherent words while reloading his firearm. His sobbing was cut short. He had stopped making noises abruptly, prompting me to open my eyes again. The foul-mouthed middle-aged bastard that broke my jaw was suddenly frozen in place, shaking, barely able to stand straight. Then again, who wouldn't find themselves in such a state after seeing the beast that descended down the blood-stained flight of stairs? It was a mostly human in form, but it walked on all fours, with each step producing an audible popping sound coming from its joints. It had a long pitched, black unkempt mane all the way to its lower back. It made no sounds whatsoever besides the popping of its joints. It crawled with its head down, as if it was completely unconcerned with anything around it, but at the same time, it was calculative and precise with its movements and pace. The creature took its time climbing down the stairs. It knew its presence alone was enough to paralyze most men with fear. The thing made its way towards the middle-aged man, who was at this point so shaken It seemed it was put under a paralyzing spell by the abomination. The creature kept on crawling on all fours until it was mere inches away from its prey. It then grabbed the loaded firearm and used it as a lever to hoist itself to its feet, while the middle-aged man seemed to be crumbling under the weight of its own fear. The creature wouldn't dare raise its head until it stood fully erect. Only then it cocked its head upwards and shot a glance towards me. A mere glance of that thing sent me into a panic. My heart started pounding so hard I felt my chest and throat tightening and aching. My right arm felt like it had caught on fire. The mere gaze of this thing almost gave me a heart attack. It wore the face of hell on its head. That ghastly pale skin, the rotten yellow jagged teeth, the exposed cheek, muscles frozen in a perpetual smile, the black rings around those unblinking, piercing, massive blue eyeballs. If the devil had a face, that was surely it. As I sat there, hopelessly awaiting my own demise due to shock-induced cardiac arrest, the demon turned its face away from me and towards the man who had seemingly turned into a living statue. Effortlessly, the creature took the firearm out of the man's hands and proceeded to point at his left kneecap. I couldn't turn my gaze away, even though I knew what was to come. I still couldn't tear my eyes from the awful spectacle to come. Thunder cracked right in front of me, and a rain of blood and flesh flew all over. An inhumane, agonized shrill flooded my eardrums. All I could register in full detail was the image of a human leg taking flight. Everything started turning grey and dull again, and I found myself closing my eyes, trying to ignore the horrors in front of me. No matter how hard I tried, I could still hear the sounds of a carcass being dragged around and the desperate and pained begging of a man. I could feel the tears once again flowing from my eyes, and I felt as if I was being stabbed in the face over and over. I felt something shaking the chair from behind, but I tried my best to ignore it, fear for the worst. I was hoping for a quick death. I was begging God to be set free from this life quickly internally. As I prayed, I could hear the dull thumps of a heavy instrument smashing into a human body, and I felt something wet hitting the back of my shirt. There was very little screaming, and soon enough that died down too. Once that was over, I felt its presence hover over me. That thing was done with its first victim, and now it was my turn. I mustered all of my courage to open my eyes to confront the thing that was going to end my life. I saw its disfigured Joker mug staring at me with those unblinking massive blue eyes. It just stood there and stared at me with a blood-stained meat cleaver in hand. Hell, it wasn't even staring at me, it was staring through me. The realization made me feel elated for some reason, and in one last act of defiance, I spat some blood at the creature's already bloodied white shirt. I saw it raising its weapon above my head and closed my eyes shut. A thumping sound permeated my ears around my legs. My stomach turned on me, spamming violently. I thought it had stabbed me in my abdomen. I couldn't feel anything leaking under my shirt. No further pain came. In fact, nothing happened. My heart was still racing like crazy, and my heart was beginning to feel heavy. I felt myself drifting out again, but for the longest time, I refused to open my eyes, thinking this Satan to be playing some demonic game with me. Eventually, the stress wore off, and I was forced to give in to the urge to open my eyes. To my shock, I was left alone with the blood-stained cleaver jammed into the chair between my legs and a mind-shatteringly painful broken jaw. The hellspawn was nowhere to be found.